What if we're not misremembering things, we're just slipping between timelines? That's a really huge question, isn't it? We could be living in one reality 1 minute, and then the next we're living in a totally different universe. All of the people around us are very similar to what we experienced before, but they've changed too. But what happens if those experiences and that reality shifts more than just a little bit into a totally different life, where your job is a different job, your partner is a different partner, and you even live in a different house? Well, that's what happened to one individual on the internet. The internet. Totally believable. This is the experience of the Traveller. It's a pseudonym, obviously, but he uses this identity to protect his true identity from the government. Which government? Not sure. Which country? Not sure. This does vary depending on who you ask, but this came from a whole series of stories on creepypasta.com, so it's obviously true. So it's obviously unreliable, but there are parts of quantum physics that potentially allow for this sort of thing to actually happen. Now, I've made another video about the back rooms, which is very closely linked to that. Have a look up here when you get the chance. In the meantime, I just want to talk about false memory, and particularly the quantum events that go on inside your brain that could potentially skip you over into a totally different universe. So psychics have been talking about changing your vibration for a very, very long time. And this also links into things like manifestation, again, linked up here. But what I wanted to do is to talk about the sorts of thoughts and processes inside your brain and the way that string theory suggests that maybe you are springing off different universes, and if other people are doing that too, potentially they could take you with them. So have you heard of the Mandela effect? This is where a lot of people believed that Nelson Mandela during the 80s died in prison. And it was all over the news at the time, and people had funeral processions and wakes and parties to celebrate his life. But that didn't obviously happen, not in our reality anyway. But there is a huge swathe of people who believed that that is the narrative that they were pumped in the news at the time. But there's no evidence of it. What's happening to our collective memory? And how does our collective memory differ from our personal memory? I've said multiple times on various videos on this channel, so I'm not going to link all of them, how reality is very subjective and it doesn't actually really exist. We can agree on the same sorts of things, but we're not talking about reality for ourselves, we're talking about reality for everybody. And so if we don't agree on certain things, then potentially there's multiple realities, and that in itself I don't think is particularly controversial. But here's the point. If my reality is that I'm sat in my garage right now, how do I know that? I've only got the senses that come in through my body, through my neurons, and ultimately through my very fallible brain. The human brain is a work of art, of course. It's the most complex thing that we know of, but it does also make mistakes. What's to say I'm not in a psych ward right now? I remember Buffy the Vampire Slayer had one episode in particular where the whole series was thrown into question, that maybe it was just a psychotic delusion and that she created all of these monsters and all of these allies as a bit of a power play because she's completely lost the plot and she's totally powerless. Now that episode ended with a dark and dingy padded cell where she was in a hospital gown and sliding down the wall backwards, and the doctors basically said, I think we've lost her. Awesome idea, also really terrifying, because it then throws into question the entire series. Is Buffy Summers an actual vampire slayer? Or, more likely, is she a paranoid schizophrenic subject to delusions and hallucination? Now, what's to say anybody's experience of reality is real? If we both look at the same thing, we'll probably see it from a slightly different angle and our experiences will be slightly different, therefore our reality is slightly different. But we're creating these realities ourselves as we're experiencing them. But with the Mandela effect, it's slightly different because lots of different people experience a totally different reality together. But it implies to me that there are two different realities. One where Nelson Mandela was alive and one where he was dead. The Mandela effect obviously is named after Nelson Mandela, but there's loads of different experiences and examples of this sort of thing happening. The Monopoly Man, for example, with his little monocle. Well, he never actually had a monocle. The Berenstain Bears in America, or the Berenstain Bears. Which one is it? Which one do you think? Let me know down in the comments. There's tons of examples of them. I won't go into all of them, but if you want to go down an internet rabbit hole, have a look at the Mandela effect. It'll blow your mind. But this suggests the many-world quantum theory, that every decision that we make changes reality in that direction. So our brains do have quantum events going on. The electrons that are bouncing around in our brain as a result of the electrical activity in our brain are essentially quantum events, which means that as we make decisions, electrical impulses are going off, and those are in and of themselves quantum events, which means that each and every quantum event can change reality. Now, I'm not going to get too techie with the quantum stuff, but essentially a quantum event means that something can both happen and not happen at the same time. Our brains are electrical computers, essentially. These biological entities that have electrical activity going on, and therefore there's loads of electrons bouncing around it at any one moment. What that means is that those electrons are essentially quantum events being in multiple positions at the same time. But as soon as we've decided on something and observed it, and this is the key, I think, as soon as we observe something, we change reality in that direction. Obviously, it's not just me that's controlling reality, it's everybody. And so there may well be different events that are happening at different times that are springing off multiple universes. So that every decision that I make will spring off a new universe. Every decision that you make will spring off a new universe. Every decision that the multiple billions of people on the planet make at any one time, whether it's just to look in that direction as opposed to in that direction, or straight down the camera at you, or blink at a certain point, all of these decisions that are being made at any one time are springing off new universes, which is the true meaning of infinity. There's so many different options. Every gradient between here and here, all of the different ones, in every direction, at all times, by everybody, every single second of every single day. It springs off an infinite number of universes. And potentially, you could step into one of those universes. Scientists have already said that dark matter may well be something to do with the multiverse, or that different universes may have collided with ours already. People have talked about the Large Hadron Collider at CERN causing a shift in reality. Things do feel different now, don't they? So how do you slide between these timelines? Well, according to a lot of these creepypastas and time travel theories and stories, it's just to do with attention. Have you seen the series called Dark Matter on Apple TV? If not, have a look at the book, because actually the book I think is a bit better. But the book by Blake Crouch describes how attention shifts reality. If you observe something as being a certain thing, it will be that thing. But if you don't observe it, then there's infinite possibility. And so it's the observation of this sort of thing that changes that reality. And maybe, just maybe, looking at the internet for 18 hours a day is what's changing people's reality, because they're observing things that have already happened and they're not very interested in what's happening in the real world, typically. Now that's a bad message for me to give as a YouTuber, isn't it? Stop watching YouTube, turn it off, go away. I don't want that to happen for this video, of course, obviously. But there is another theory, of course. Do we always remember things correctly? Well, obviously not. There are experiments in false memory where we can actually implant memories that never really happened. Even something as big as going on a hot air balloon ride that you've never been on before. So how do we know that we're in the right timeline? Typically that will be how well we fit in to an existing timeline or other people's events of the world. If I believed that I was a snake, would I fit into society? Probably not. Not if I truly believed that I was a snake, because I wouldn't talk and I would move around and I would eat rats and all of those sorts of things. But that would mean that I wouldn't be able to fit into society, and so my reality would probably be adjusted very quickly because of that sort of social test. So if I truly believed that I was a snake, I would go out into the world and do my thing as a snake, and people would very, very quickly say, that is not a right guy. You know, all of those sorts of things, the social constructs that we're already living in, essentially traps us in the reality that we're in at the moment. That doesn't mean that I should go around and pretend to be a snake. Pretending would be pretending, and it wouldn't be real. But if you want to change reality like that, maybe we do need that sort of shift in mental pattern. But if we start to shift that dramatically, it will lead to mass psychosis. So maybe all of this is just a moot point. Maybe we all do live in reality, it's just that our perceptions of it are what's changing and not reality itself. So please let me know what you think down in the comments, and if you want to see this sort of video before everybody else, become a member of this channel. The links again are down in the comments. Please click that like button, subscribe and ding that bell, and I'll be back next time with some more magical awesomeness. In the meantime, have a look at this video all about time travel, and as always,
stay magical.